Set down for first reading. The House comes to questions for oral answer. Question number 1 in the name of the Honourable David Cunliffe.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Mr Speaker, to the Prime Minister, does he stand by his statement that, quote, one of the risks for us is that there's heavily pronounced economic development in Auckland but not in the rest of the country?
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr Speaker, yes, that's always a risk, but it's not what I'm seeing across the country.
Supplementary question, Honourable David Cunliffe.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. How does the Prime Minister explain the widening gap between Auckland and the rest of the country when most regions have seen a decrease in weekly incomes since 2008?
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr Speaker, I don't believe that to be correct. If one looks at real after-tax median income, compare that between 2006 and 2013, Mr Speaker, it's gone up 11.8% in Auckland, but I note that it's gone up 14.4% in Taranaki, where apparently everybody's leaving. Well, that's what they told David anyway. Manawatu, Wanganui 13.6%, Northland 17.7%, Canterbury 14.1%. Mr Speaker, it would appear that the statement made by the Leader of the Opposition is one he's just made up.
Supplementary, Mr Speaker. Supplementary, Mr Speaker.
Supplementary question, Honourable David Cunliffe.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Why has annual population growth in the regions halved under National from 0.9% under Labor to just 0.5%?
Well, Mr. Speaker,
Prime Minister.
I really am truly shocked that the Leader of the Opposition would ask that question after yesterday saying, and I quote, people have left in the regions with no choice but been left with no choice but to leave in droves. Mr Speaker, in answering that question, let's go to the census data released today. Lo and behold, in 15 of the 16 regions, they've gone up in population. And in Taranaki, they haven't actually left in droves. They've gone in droves, probably because of the oil and gas industry and the rural sector that's there. It's gone up by 5.3%. And I say this, Mr Speaker, those people under a national government, yes, they will get support for what they do. And what those people won't get is, guess what? They won't get the living wage under David Cunliffe in Taranaki because he wants to pay it to people in Wellington.
Order. Point of order. Grant Robertson.
Mr Speaker, I noticed a couple of times there towards the end of the Prime Minister's answer you were as if to stand to sit him down. That answer was both long and largely irrelevant.
Order. And that might well be the opinion of the member. I thought the question was adequately addressed. Supplementary question, Honourable David Cunliffe.
Mr Speaker, how many of the 200,000 New Zealanders who have left permanently for Australia seeking that brighter future under his watch have left from our regions?
Right Honourable Prime
Mr.
Minister.
Speaker, I don't have the exact number, but I know this much. 625,000.
Point of order, Grant Robertson.
Mr Speaker, the Prime Minister made clear he didn't have the information to answer that question. Anything else he says won't add to the order of the House.
Order. The member will resume his seat. I will be determining when the Prime Minister has finished his answer. Right Honourable Prime Minister.
So, Mr Speaker, I do know that under a Labor government, 625,000 people left for Australia. I do know in the last year of the last Labor government, 35,000 people left, and I now know those numbers are falling to 27,000 now.
Order. Point of order. The Right Honourable Winston Peters.
Mr Speaker, your answer to Mr Robinson was that you determine when the Prime Minister has finished the question. Around about when were you going to do that, given those last two sentences from the Prime Minister, which relates to another administration and not his?
Order. I give the same answer to the honourable member. I will determine when the question's answered, when I'm ready to do so.
Speaker.
Point of order, Grant Robertson.
Mr Speaker, in light of that ruling, can I seek some clarification then on what criteria were you judging that the Prime Minister's answer remained relevant? He was addressing material that he's not responsible for.
Order. I will be determining when I decide the answer is sufficient, and I won't hesitate if I've reached that point to ask whoever is answering the question to sit down. How the further supplementary question,
Speaker.
Honourable David Cunliffe.
What does the Prime Minister intend doing, if anything, about the potential loss of up to 200 people's jobs at independent fisheries in Christchurch?
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Well, Mr Speaker, I haven't looked at the matter in relation to independent fisheries specifically. I haven't done that. Specifically, I haven't done that, Mr Speaker, but what I can say is independent fisheries are based in Christchurch. So Christchurch is one of the government's top priorities. Mr Speaker, Christchurch has a 6.6% growth rate, Mr Speaker. Christchurch has $40 billion worth of investments going into it, and this is what's really interesting, because when this government stood up for 3,200 jobs in Southland, those people said do nothing. This government did something, they said do nothing.
Order. That answer is yes. Supplementary question. Order. Supplementary question, Louise Upston.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Supplementary to the Prime Minister. Has he received any reports on income growth in New Zealand's regions?
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr Speaker, yes, I've received a report saying that the real medium weekly incomes had dropped in some regions since 2006, including a drop of $45 a week in Southland. Then I received another report using official information from Statistics New Zealand, showing that the real medium weekly incomes had in fact grown in all regions of New Zealand by an average of 6%. And in Southland, the real medium weekly income had grown by $53 a week before tax and $76 a week when you take our tax cuts into account. So I wonder which one to believe, the government statistician or David Cunliffe. I'm going with the government statistician.
Order. Order. Supplementary question.
Thank you, Mr
Honourable
Speaker.
David Cunliffe.
What will the Prime Minister say to the up to 90 scientists losing their jobs at Invermay Research Centre near Dunedin, or to the people of Dunedin who've already lost the jobs, closed down on his watch at Hillside Workshops?
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr Speaker, the first thing I'd say to them is that consultation process is ongoing, so that hasn't been completed. But you see, Mr Speaker, when I go to Palmerston North, if a decision is made about what's happening at Invermay and those people are relocated to Lincoln or Palmerston North, that's a seat, by the way, held by Labor. I'll be saying those people are coming to the regions from that area. You see, if I went to a Council of Trade Union speech, I'd say the same thing to the media outside.
Point of order, Mr Speaker.
No, point of order.
Point of order, Mr Speaker. Throughout the Prime Minister's answers today, in almost every answer, he has gone into material that he is either not responsible for or is not relevant to the question. I ask you to hold him to standing orders.
I invite the member to consider the question that was asked and then the content of the answer. It was about 90 scientists that may lose their job at Invermay. The Prime Minister talked about consultation ongoing and then talked about a visit to Palmerston. At that stage, I rose to my feet. Now, if the member's going to continue to interject, I will have no hesitation in asking Grant Robertson to be leaving the House. Further supplementaries? Question number 2, the Honourable Kate Wilkinson.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister.